All right, guys, so we got some updates here on the Trump administration's handling of Israel, Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, etc. So let's just go ahead and hop into the latest here. As pointed out by Axios, now there was a video of this, but it was on Air Force One, I think, so the audio was incredibly hard to hear. So I'm just going to read you guys the latest on what Trump thinks should be done with Gaza. Fits in with exactly everything that we have been warning about, everything that we have been talking about in regards to Trump and Israel's desire to fully ethnically cleanse the Gaza Strip as well as the West Bank and allow for Israeli settlement there and potentially for Trump on a personal level, maybe some real estate deal or something. So here's the direct quote. He says, "You're talking about 1.5 million people, that's an undercount, and we just clean out that whole thing. Clean out that whole thing." He continues, he says, quote, "It's literally a demolition site. Almost everything is demolished and people are dying there, so I'd rather get involved with some of the Arab nations and build housing at a different location where they can maybe live in peace for a change." So let's make no mistake about exactly what Trump is saying here. He's saying the entire population of Gaza should be forcefully removed, and he indicated maybe they should be sent off to Egypt or to Jordan or to some other Arab state. And then Israelis, I guess, by implication, would be allowed to settle there, and they would, I guess, rebuild it in the way that Israel envisions, right? Whatever Benjamin Netanyahu and Bezalel Smotrich and even guys like Itamar Ben-Gvir, even though he resigned, whatever their dream scenario would be. That is what Trump is openly talking about here. Look at how casually he describes a full-blown ethnic cleansing. I mean, he literally uses the word here. Clean out the whole thing. Clean out what from Gaza? He's talking about the people of Gaza, right? And he says it's a demolition site. Whose fault is that? Whose bombs created this demolition site? Right? It was U.S. bombs. Speaking of U.S. bombs, by the way, that we've been sending to Israel throughout the entirety of this genocide, we also had this update a couple days ago that I, talked about in a previous video, but Trump makes 2,000-pound bombs available to Israel, undoing a Biden pause. So this was like one of the very few mild restrictions that Biden put in place. Is we don't need to send you more 2,000-pound bombs. Keep in mind, Israel by that point had already dropped hundreds of these 2,000-pound bombs that have a massive lethal radius to them, completely unnecessary, completely absurd to drop on one of the most densely populated places on the face of the planet. So Biden put a pause on the delivery of 2,000-pound bombs after Israel had already dropped hundreds of them, and Trump is saying, even though I'm personally calling Gaza a demolition site, we need to give Israel more 2,000-pound bombs to continue to drop on what? The demolition site? The rubble? Just bounce the rubble over and over and over again? Now, I mean, this fits in, again, exactly with what we expected Trump's policy to be, especially given some of the people who we've talked about on this channel that he has put into his administration, like his ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, who doesn't even do the U.S. tap dance pretending to care about a two-state solution. He's openly against a two-state solution, and he in fact does not even believe that Palestinian people exist. Him, alongside Elise Stefanik, alongside Pete Hegseth, alongside Mike Waltz, alongside many others in Trump's administration, fully support and back, including Trump himself, Israel annexing the entirety of the West Bank. So this is the Greater Israel Project, as it has been called, that Trump is now full-throatedly backing, and we are seeing sort of the early stages of this come into play under his administration. Now, just to remind everybody, because I had some things floating across my timeline, like this one here from Adam Kinzinger, Slava Ukrainian, his name tag there, who pointed out, wonder how the Dearborn folks who voted for Trump because of Biden's Gaza policy feel now. So basically, he's pointing the finger at Arab Americans who live in Dearborn, Michigan, who turned against Biden, and he's pointing the finger at them and saying, you are to blame for the fact that Trump is now in office and therefore that this policy is currently underway. Now, as accurately pointed out here by Michael Yohanna, he says people are forgetting that Biden also explored dumping Gaza's Palestinians into the Sinai Peninsula, and this was stopped by Egypt. Egypt said, we can't possibly accept the entire population of Gaza because there would be massive protests by the millions in the streets of Egypt, and it would completely upend our entire societal functioning. So we can't do that. But this is something that was floated by the Biden administration. So, I mean, again, to pretend as if, listen, there are many different policy arenas in which there are notable differences between Biden and Trump, right? I gave credit to Biden for pulling out of Afghanistan. Trump didn't do that. I gave credit to Biden for his National Labor Relations Board, for his FTC under Lena Khan. There are some notable areas where there is a gap in their policy. When it comes to Israel, there is no gap. The only gap that exists is a rhetorical gap where Biden will pretend to do sort of the finger wagging and, oh, no, please don't do that, but then continue under the table, sending them tens of billions of dollars in weaponry and continuing to give them diplomatic cover on the international stage. The only difference is a rhetorical difference, right? There is no substantive outcome difference between the Trump and Biden policies when it comes to Israel, when it comes to Gaza, when it comes to the West Bank, and the rest of it. So it's just a disgusting statement here from somebody like Adam Kinzinger to point the finger at people who, in many circumstances, have family members that have been killed by U.S. bombs inside of Gaza, and to say it's your fault that Trump is suggesting an ethnic cleansing. No. That's what has been happening. That has been the U.S. policy for the last year and a half of this genocide. Are we just all going to memory hold the fact that Gaza was turned into a quote-unquote demolition site by the Biden administration? Are we just going to forget that that happened? No, of course not. Now, again, is Trump's administration more aggressively Christian Zionist and supportive of Israel openly? Sure, I guess, to some extent at least. But again, substantively, there is no real difference here. Okay, so let's not pretend that there is. And let's definitely not point the blame at voters instead of pointing the blame at politicians, especially Democrats, who basically decided at the end of the day, we're willing to risk losing this election and ended up losing the election at the end of the day. We're willing to do that instead of checking Israel in any way, shape, or form. And Kamala had this opportunity as well. She was asked on multiple occasions, would your policy change in regards to Israel, in regards to Gaza? And she said no, over and over and over again. She even said that she would not even consider restricting some weapons to Israel to conduct this genocide. Now, at the same time as Trump is delivering this quote here of dreaming of sending these Palestinians to Egypt or Jordan, there are now tens of thousands of Palestinians who are marching across the Netzarim axis, asserting their right to return to northern Gaza, which is something that was supposedly included in this sort of like half-fake ceasefire agreement that was put into place between Hamas and Israel. And of course, Israel has been sort of denying people the right to return. There was reporting earlier today, I think from Dropsite News, where Jeremy works, that some people have been allowed to return to the north. But you can see, I mean, a massive flood of people demanding that this portion of this at least temporary pause in the fighting agreement is upheld. And, in the midst of this happening, as people are trying to return to the north, of course, we had Israeli troops who fired on displaced Palestinians trying to return to their homes, killing at least 2. Some of the other estimates that I've seen are much higher than that. Now, we also have this clip that was floating around. Here we have Gaza, basically where Hamas militants are sort of doing a show of force. This was taking place as one of these hostage exchanges was going on with Israel. And the only reason really that I show you guys this video is to show you that what Antony Blinken said a week ago, a couple weeks ago, or whatever, we covered it on the channel at the time, when Antony Blinken said that Hamas has likely recruited as many fighters as Israel has managed to kill over the last year and a bit, he was correct. He was correct, meaning, by implication, that the entire justification that the U.S. and Israel have given for this genocide, that we're doing a targeted war against Hamas, we have to remove them from power, we have no other choice but to obliterate all of the civilian infrastructure, to slaughter tens of thousands of innocent men, women, and children. We have no other choice because we have to defeat Hamas. And again, the reason I'm showing you this video is just to reemphasize that that is not, was not, ever going to happen. Okay? That is not part of even what the goal is for Israel. Remember the history of Israel actually helping to back Hamas to keep them in power as sort of a divide and conquer strategy with Palestinians in Gaza in the West Bank. But this was never going to happen. Okay? You cannot turn an entire region into rubble, make thousands, if not tens of thousands of orphans, wipe out people's entire bloodlines, their entire families, destroy their homes, destroy their hospitals, destroy their schools, and expect that that is not going to lead to some sort of a radicalization, that that's not going to lead to people taking up arms against the occupation force. So the eliminate Hamas, the eradicate Hamas, the remove Hamas from power seems to be an utter and complete failure at this point, which again begs the question of, well, what the fuck was the point of any of this slaughter? What was the point of it? Outside of what Trump was suggesting at the beginning of this video, which is the total and complete ethnic cleansing to make life in Gaza impossible, etc., which I think is the real goal. Now, we also have reporting here from Drop Site News in terms of some horrifying and disturbing reports, but yet part and parcel of everything that we have been covering over the last year or so. In this case, we had a 2-year-old child, right, a baby, who was shot in the head by IDF soldiers, not even in Gaza, but in the West Bank, in Jenin, where Israel has been ramping up their, occupation force offensive, where we have seen pogroms taking place all across the West Bank by Israeli settlers. There has been a massive, amount of arrests, amount of killing, amount of, offensive here from Israel. And this was just one story. So I just wanted to read this to you guys real quick. So Haaretz, the Israeli news outlet, spoke to the grandfather of a 2-year-old Palestinian girl who was fatally shot Saturday night by IDF soldiers near Jenin in the occupied West Bank. He reports that Israeli troops opened fire on the family home without justification or warning, saying that, quote, Layla was shot while eating dinner inside their home. Her grandfather, Bassem Asus, told Haaretz her mother was shot in the arm and her aunt was hit in the head by shrapnel. They say that he also said that he was confronted the soldiers after Layla was shot, saying, quote, at first she was still alive and crying. I asked the soldiers, why did you kill her? She was just a little baby. How is she involved? Why did you shoot at us? The soldier told me, quote, sorry. He says, we spoke in English. What do you mean, sorry? She was shot in the head. They continue with some more quotes here, saying, we were having dinner. It was about 8 p.m. We were home, my daughters and I only have daughters, and my baby grandchild. There were soldiers outside, but we didn't hear them. We had the windows closed due to the weather, and suddenly they started to shoot at us, and we were surprised. Why would they be shooting at us? The woman ran into an interior room. They kept shooting. My daughter started to scream, and we got onto the ground because a window had been broken and there were glass shards. My daughter held her daughter to her chest because she intended to feed her, and then she yelled that Layla had been hit, and he grabbed her and went down to the street. So here we have yet another instance of an innocent Palestinian child being assassinated, killed for absolutely no justifiable reason. And again, this is taking place in Jenin. This is in the West Bank. This is not in Gaza. This is not a part of an active firefight with Hamas or whatever else the case may be. And the only response that we get from the IDF is, quote unquote, sorry, a whoops-a-daisy. Oops, I just killed a 2-year-old child. How do these people go home at night? How do these people sleep? I mean, they were speaking English. It's possible that the IDF soldier who committed, let's call it what it is, a murder here, it's possible that they were an American. It's possible that they were English. It's possible that they were from someplace in Europe. So these are people who, in many instances, are choosing to go over to Israel, are choosing to participate either in the occupation, the ethnic cleansing, or the genocide, and they are committing these kinds of horrific crimes. And then in some circumstances, they come home and they live with us, right? We have another instance here of the IDF doing what they do best, which is posting their own war crimes, human rights abuses, and just grotesque displays in general on social media. Here we have them raiding homes in Bethlehem and filming themselves in women's lingerie that they find there as well, from homes that they, have either displaced people from or killed people in. And as pointed out here by this poster, it is infuriating that American taxpayers are forced to subsidize these degenerate scoundrels. And I, don't think it's unfair in the slightest to call them that. Now, we also have here a report from Al Jazeera on what the latest is in southern Lebanon, as again, there was a ceasefire agreement that was put in place between Israel and Lebanon, and seems like Israel is falling short, let's say, of following through on their end of this agreement. Let's go ahead and watch this short little clip here.
An agreement reached in November. Saina reports from Burj Al Malouk in southern Lebanon.
A few meters separate the Israeli army from the people of South Lebanon's villages who want to go home. Israel's military has warned them against returning and is using force to hold ground. Civilians have been shot dead or injured as they tried to make their way past the barriers. Israel was supposed to withdraw its troops from Lebanese territory before a 60-day deadline ended early on Sunday. It's part of the ceasefire agreement that ended last year's war between Israel and Hezbollah.
We will stay here this day, tomorrow, 1 month, 1 year, every day we will stay here to enter our country.
There were casualties among Lebanon's army as well. That's not directly involved in the conflict.
There appears to be a new form of resistance. These people who have been displaced from their villages for more than a year are showing defiance, but the Israeli army is just as confrontational.
In the middle is the Lebanese army, which Israel says has still not dismantled Hezbollah's military infrastructure and extended its authority across southern Lebanon as it agreed under the deal. But the army commanders blame the presence of Israeli troops for delaying its deployment of soldiers. Supporters of Hezbollah, which was militarily weakened in the war, are questioning the army's ability to protect them.
Where is the army command? Why doesn't it give an order to its troops to lead the way so that we can enter our villages? Hezbollah stepped aside and given the responsibility to the Lebanese army to act.
In other areas along the border, the Lebanese army did escort civilians into some towns that Israeli forces had withdrawn from. Much of the western and central regions along the 120-kilometer border is back in the hands of the state.
Do not tell us it's forbidden to enter our villages. We've been waiting for more than a year and 4 months to enter.
The UN peacekeeping force working alongside the Lebanese army is warning further violence could undermine the fragile security situation. And it's warning residents conditions for their safe return are not yet in place. For now, these people will have to wait. The Israeli army has not said how long it intends to remain in Lebanese territory. But the U.S., that heads the ceasefire monitoring committee, did say a short and temporary extension of the withdrawal deadline is needed.
So, of course, we have there the U.S. stepping in and asking for an extension for the IDF to withdraw from the space that they were supposed to withdraw from, given this time frame. Now, as you guys could see from the videos there, right, in some of these communities, there's basically nothing to return to. And that same thing applies arguably to a much greater extent in northern Gaza as well, as Israel has been firing upon some people who are trying to return to the north, but even as some people are getting through, there is almost nothing to return to, right? As Trump said, it's been, turned into a demolition site by Israel and the U.S. So, I mean, it's as bleak as it gets for many of these people. And the amount of bravery, the amount of resilience that I've seen from Palestinians, that I've seen from Lebanese communities as well, blows my mind, because I couldn't possibly place myself in this same kind of situation where I'd been displaced for over a year, where my home had potentially been completely flattened to the ground, where there is nothing essentially to return to, right? There is no normalcy. There is no real sense of life to return to. And yet these people are resilient. And so to put that into perspective, here we had a viral clip that was going around of one defiant Lebanese woman who was faced with an Israeli tank in southern Lebanon and stood up to it, 10 toes down, telling them to leave, saying that this is their land and that they have a right to return to it. And she again is completely surrounded by rubble, right? I mean, the confidence, the courage, the amount of restraint that this takes to go up and do this kind of thing is, again, incomprehensible to me. But yet we have people doing this, and people thankfully capturing the video of that kind of an iconic moment, I think. Now, to finish off here, we had this report from Al Jazeera. Again, similar to some of the Palestinians in Gaza trying to return to the north, we also have Israel killing at least 22. Updated reports, again, are higher than that, but killed 22 people in southern Lebanon as they were trying to return on the day that the army was supposed to withdraw. So I'll leave you guys off with that. There are your updates for today on Gaza, Lebanon, the West Bank. I wish I could bring you guys better news. I wish that it wasn't so bleak all the time, but unfortunately, we go from the Biden administration to the Trump administration, and basically the core policy is Israel gets to do whatever they want, especially with the Trump administration that is totally and completely bought off by the Israel lobby. We reported on the fact that he took $100 million from Miriam Adelson in exchange for allowing Israel to fully and totally annex the West Bank. We've talked about his appointments and their sort of like Christian Zionist, Christian nationalist beliefs and whatever else. It's pretty despicable.
Politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me. Everyone is saying